I'm going to ask the board secretary. It is 6:30. I want to see if I have all of my colleagues present. Great. Looks like I do. All righty. With this, it is 6:30, so we will go ahead and open up this meeting. And I want to call the meeting to order. The regular meeting of Kansas City Public Schools Board of Directors is called to order. The secretary will please call the roll.
Ms. Manser?
Here.
Mr. Abarca?
Present.
Ms. Cortez?
Here.
Mr. Hogan?
Here.
Dr. Jones? Let's see her here. Mr. Wasserstrom?
Here.
Ms. Wolfsey?
Here.
Thank you. Did we just hear Dr. Jones? Was she on there? All right. I know she'll join us if she's not here quite yet. The first item on our for our meeting is the approval of the agenda. It would be in order for me to receive a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay. It has been moved and seconded. Are there any questions or is there any debate on the motion? Hearing none, the secretary will call the roll.
Ms. Manser?
Yes.
Mr. Abarca?
Yes.
Ms. Cortez?
Yes.
Mr. Hogan?
Yes.
Dr. Jones is not here yet. Mr. Wasserstrom?
Yes.
Ms. Wolfsey?
Yes.
Thank you. The agenda is approved. The first item that we will go to is public comment. We have one individual who has indicated they wish to address the board this evening. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per speaker. And so with that, the chair now recognizes Tom Love.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you. Thank you.
Wonderful. I am calling in on a meeting to speak concerning a special piece of legislation that came effective last year. It's the number on it. The law is 163.018, and it's an early childhood education program, and it covers 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. I'm particularly interested in the 5-year-olds, and you can utilize the average daily attendance formula to provide early childhood education. So, for the last several school board meetings, I've been talking about, we're starting 4-year-olds in kindergarten and then automatically promoting them as 5-year-olds entering first grade, which is illegal according to Missouri state law. It's only allowed in Kansas City and St. Louis because they have populations over 300,000, and that's the requirement in the law. But they're supposed to complete kindergarten, and of course, the definition of what complete means is the question, a legal question, I suppose. But to me, it doesn't just mean attend; it means to complete. And unfortunately, these children are not. Some of them are not developmentally ready to begin, and then they're again automatically promoted to the next grade, and so on and so on and so on, and they're not giving a fair chance. I'm sitting in the parking lot of an elementary school in Blue Valley where my grandson Charlie goes. He attended kindergarten this year, but when he was 6 months old, his mother told me, I was driving her to the airport because they lived in San Antonio at the time. She told me that Charlie was going to stay in pre-K an additional year. He was born premature in the summer, and he's a boy, which I didn't say anything. I was like, all right. I never talked to her about this. Although I've talked to some real experts about the summer school birthday boys in particular. But her mother is a pre-K teacher, and it was a no-brainer for her. And she knew that that was the right thing to do for Charlie. Well, he's going to be in first grade this year. And guess what? He's going to be 7 years old. You're not required to start first grade until you're 7 in Missouri. But he's still going to graduate when he's 18 because graduation takes place towards the beginning of May. He's going to be a star. He's developmentally ready. And I can't tell you the difference between him and in just 6 months' time. Well, this law allows us to do that with our 5-year-olds and our 4-year-olds. I mean, we don't have to put them. What we need to do is allow the kindergarten teachers to screen the children entering kindergarten. Parents, your child's going to be ready for kindergarten next year. We're going to put them in a full-day pre-K program. It's paid for by the state. And let them screen them and get them ready. The kindergarten teachers will just go, they'll love this. It just will make a tremendous difference. And then if we have the world-class literacy labs like they do at Charlie's school and, you know, these Johnson County schools, these districts where you have a reading specialist and para, then they get the other help they need. If they're, you know, they help the bottom 20% every day. They get 500 hours of tutoring before they enter third grade.
Mr. Love, I'm sorry to interrupt. Thank you so much. I gave you a little extra time there, but I really appreciate your comments. We always welcome hearing from you and the public. So I want to say thank you very much for your signing up for public comment today. All right, that was the only individual signed up for public comment. Just a reminder, we do take public comment for up to 10 individuals each month. It is easy to sign up. You can reach out to the KCPS board secretary. You can send an email online, or you can make a phone call and you can add your name. This is a different way to do public comment because we're not all together in person, but we still welcome and we want that public comment. So please take advantage of that opportunity. The next item on the agenda is a report from the District Advisory Council. For this item, I recognize Ms. Susan Stocking of the KCPS District Advisory Council. Ms. Stocking, are you with us?
Yes, thank you, Chairwoman Manser, Dr. Bedell, and the rest of the members of the board. I just really wanted to pop in today and give a quick update on the District Advisory Committee. Of course, we weren't able to have our April general meeting, so our officer elections have been postponed for now. I wanted to let the members of the board know that we're still available whenever needed. And recently we had the opportunity to consult with board member Arbaka on a proposal that he's working on. I wanted to also thank Dr. Bedell for your stand today against the systemic and generational racism in the Kansas City that we're seeing again and again with development deals that the city continues to put forward. Part of my role in DAC is also part of KC Watch, and we've been having discussions with the Kansas City Chamber of Commerce about the use of incentives and the disparate impact on Black school districts south of the river. I strongly encourage the board to take a formal stand against the Blue Scope, Steel, and Hotel Bravo projects currently working their way through the City Council. Education is economic development. Education is workforce development, and we need concrete policy change so we're not playing whack-a-mole with individual projects as we have done for years. And just finally, just as a parent, I want to thank the district for seeking input on options for reopening. This is really difficult decisions. It's parents being able to enter the workforce. It's also considering the health and well-being of our teachers and our students and support staff. It's hard. There are no easy solutions, and it's going to demand maximum flexibility. And so, again, I thank you for seeking the input. And I've heard from several parents that were appreciative that they were able to give feedback. I will hand it back to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Stocking, and we are pleased to have you make a report. We have added the District Advisory Committee as a standing item on the board business agenda so that you can always bring a representative to speak, and it's an important voice and we respect and honor that. So thank you for sharing those comments. For the presentation of this evening's revenue and expenditure report, the chair recognizes Board Treasurer Manny Abarca.
Thanks, Chairwoman. Give me 1 second here as I make sure and pull these back up. While I'm doing that, though, I just wanted to take a moment to not answer my phone. Take a moment to acknowledge the hard work that Dr. Bedell and Ms. Quinley and her entire team has done leading up to our budget discussion and constantly preparing all these numbers while in transition for all their accounting efforts. So kudos to all of them, and a round of applause that we won't do in this moment necessarily, but no, virtually we will. So moving on to our budget report. On the page 2 here, I wanted to bring your attention first to the beginning fund balance that we have, and as well as comparing that to the ending fund balance. Per Amendment 1 in January should be 52 million compared to what you see here as actual on May 31st of 90 million. This is because our revenues are mostly collected. However, as an accrual-based entity, we will have payroll and benefits costs through August 15th when the teachers receive their last paycheck for 2019-2020 school year. The fund balance amount will decrease as we close out the year-end accounting work. So, going on to our next page here. All right. So on this slide, you want to look at the net current and delinquent property taxes collected, lines 5111 and 5112. As the end of May is roughly $1.2 million under budget. However, we exceeded budget with early June collections. Also looking at the Prop C sales tax revenues, 5113 are collected 2 months behind. So we have 3 months left to collect as part of the 2019-2020 revenues. Due to the COVID slowdown of economy, we do anticipate this hitting budget on this line. Oh, sorry, we do not anticipate hitting budget on this line. And just again, that's COVID-related deficit there. Also, I think, did we change? We're still on the same slide. Interest on taxes appear behind in both 5145. So I think that's the previous slide that we were looking at. Yep, there we go. 5145 and 5148. However, this is a collection that comes with delinquent payments, so we will likely catch up once we receive those delinquent funds. Now moving on to the next page. There we go. All right, so total local revenues collected to date is 97.6% of the budget. Local revenues are at 80.2% of the total budget revenue. I like when Linda's doing this cursor thing. This is great. Moving on to page 5, fines. There we go. Fines and county stock insurance each are paid one time annually in the summer. So 0% is completely normal at this point in the year, and as we'll receive those funds coming up. Some lines of state funding are trailing as they are reimbursement model. We spend, then request reimbursement. We anticipated them to hit budget for the most part. Year-to-date state collection is at 19.8% due to the reimbursement model. So again, those dollars will come back in. Moving on to the next page. Medicaid is billed and reimbursed quarterly, again on a trailing reimbursement model, but we anticipate those are on target for budget. Linda states that there are many lines that are reimbursement in this area, so that's why you'll see some of the things that are trailing here. And so we anticipate receiving those funds as the reimbursements come in from the different sources. In the nutrition service line, we would expect to be nearly fully reimbursed at the end of May. However, due to cash flow concerns at the state level, our May reimbursement was held up until June. We should be on target to budget and in full coverage of costs of meals provided. Federal is currently collected at 81.5% of the budget, right on track in total, and is 16% of our total budget. So total revenues to date are at 93.1% of budget. Again, just breaking down some of the displays here, showing you how these dollars are spent. All right, so moving on to make sure my tracks are lined up here. 6131. Yep. So certified salaries, teachers and admins have several checks remaining as teachers' pay is spread over 12 months and the last paycheck is received on August 14th. Supplemental pay line 6131 is for building department leaders, coaching stipends, etc. We have a large June payment annually for the second semester payment that should be coming out. Unused leave is a line that allows for people to be paid for up to 7 days of unused vacation. If they have hit the max carryover amount, this is always paid in June unless someone leaves the district before June 30th and is paid out for their days on the books at that time. So moving on to the next slide. Several lines should be fully paid for the year, partially due to the early end of the year and the situation with COVID going on. Those include election services, substitute pay lines 6328 and 6329. We will have unused budgets in some of these lines as well. So moving on to the next one. We are at 65% of budget for the year on purchase services and do not expect to underspend these lines due to the early schools, or do expect to underspend these lines due to the early school closure from COVID. More lines that are fully spent due to early closure, no fourth quarter basically. So you'll see a lot of these consistent mid-60s areas of these revenues, or these expenditures. Year-to-date revenues over expenditures is $46 million. However, while revenue is fully collected, we do have about 20% of payroll and benefits to pay out, as well as our monthly expenses. We do not anticipate a positive ending revenue of expenditures. Again, just showing, kind of displaying how the expenditures are spent, focused primarily on salaries and benefits, and the rest of the breakdowns here. So for our investments, total investments as of May 31st is $138 million. Again, set on maturities to support pay dates until we begin receiving 2020 property tax revenues. These investments help make sure that we maintain cash flow. So that is why we are making these specifics here. So year-to-date, property tax collection have exceeded budget by $9.7 million, mostly due to receipt of payments made and resolved under protest. So I'm sure there's some expansion that probably Ms. Quinley would want to highlight here, but that is my report at this point.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions? And I wondered if we could go back to the property tax slide, if Ms. Quinley could take us back to that slide for a moment. Oops. Sorry, Quinley. There we go. Oops, back one more.
Joe, can you move us?
Oh my goodness, sorry.
That's okay. There we go.
Okay, so I just wanted to kind of restate to make sure my understanding. So far to date, we've received $8.4 million that was paid under protest as of the conclusion of last year, correct?
As of last week.
Okay, as of last week. Okay, so this is so to date, since the start of the taxes paid under protest, this is the sum total of what we've received?
Correct.
Okay.
The 8.4 million is the total that's been released. There is still many million being held as either suits were filed or they've appealed up to the State Tax Commission.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions regarding the presentation from Mr. Abarca and Ms. Quinley? All right. Then hearing none, thank you, Board Treasurer Abarca, for that presentation. And we will move to ad hoc committee reports. And so I would like to invite either of my colleagues, Ms. Wolfsey or Dr. Jones, if there are reports to present. I believe Ms. Wolfsey has a presentation.
Yes, thank you, Chairwoman. Dr. Jones, did you want to go? Okay. So I just would like to bring to the attention of the public a bill that actually was passed in this last legislative session. It was House Bill 1854. It is sitting on the governor's desk awaiting signature. All in all, this became an omnibus bill. There was a lot packed into it. And while there was some good legislation, there was one piece in particular that really negatively affects Kansas City public schools in particular, but also our other school districts around the state also have been concerned about this bill as well. Let me explain what the provision that they're mostly concerned about. It essentially reduced the length of the filing period from, in many cases, 5 weeks to 3, but in the Kansas City public school area, it specifically took us down from 4 weeks to 1. Obviously, that presents a number of concerns. Some adverse impacts that we highlighted were that, that filing time is a bit too compressed, maybe leaving us with well-qualified candidates not having the opportunity to serve. It is kind of difficult to explain why we were treated differently than other school districts around the state. And that the time, even though, it's enough that we went down to 1 week, but that 1 week is actually the week of December 22nd to December 29th. So that actually is the holiday week, forcing not only potential candidates to have to kind of scramble during that time, but also the folks that manage that filing process within the school districts themselves. So on June 10th, the board did send a letter respectfully requesting veto of that House Bill 1854. Right now, we're waiting to hear how the governor is going to decide on this. We have asked our lobbyists to speak to the governor and his folks, and they have done that, but we don't have any further information at this time. We do know that our other board colleagues around the state are also asking for a veto of this, and that essentially we would try as to correct the bill in next year's session.
Thank you so much. So it's my understanding, Ms. Wolfsey, that it was going to affect every Missouri school board in the state. It's just that the problem was particularly acute for us because it would cut us down to 1 week filing time. But in fact, every school district in Missouri is going to be affected if this bill is signed. And so that's part of the momentum around asking the governor to veto this bill. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. And I do know that the Missouri School Boards Association has asked school board members around the state to please send communications to the governor asking that he veto this bill. So thank you for sharing that. Are there any other questions or comments on this particular issue? Great. Well, hearing none, thank you again for that report. The next items of business are the report of the superintendent. The chair recognizes Dr. Bedell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're going to go ahead. I got a couple of very important items that I am going to read tonight. And before we do that, I think it's important to set the tone by doing our video highlight on KCPS graduation. And then I want to share with you all in the community one of the caps that a student had on today. And I think I could show it on here. And then I'm going to get into my DECA statement and into my tax abatement statement before we move over to regular business items. So let's go with the video first.
2020 has been a year.
Uh-oh.
And especially true for the class of 2020. Kansas City Public Schools was forced to close to protect our students, staff, and community. Learning and achievement did not stop. And
so we're having some technical issues here.
In order to
What's going on?
I said we're having technical issues. The volume's going in and out.
Okay.
The video looks good, but the volume is going in and out.
So if everyone can mute Dr. Bedell, Ms. Manser, it might help with the audio. It's really tricky for videos during these Teams calls to convey properly. So if we can all mute, let's try that, Joe, and see if that helps. Okay.
There's no volume at all now.
Okay, I'm gonna try this one more time. I think someone muted me.
"2020 has been especially true for the class of 2020. Kansas City Public Schools was forced to close to our students, staff, and community. Achievement did not stop, and the class was strong. In order to honor the and maintain a sense of normalcy despite this, with Tico Productions to provide a graduation. We know that
Okay, so at this point, we're not going to be able to see that video. I apologize. I'll be glad when we're all back in person. I just don't know. It's just choppy like this on and off. So, but the video was, I'll do this. The video was highlighting 3 weeks of our commencement experience, and a number of our parents were just so thankful that they had an opportunity to watch their kids walk across that stage, get their names called, receive their high school diplomas, and just be able to have that experience. And so we're thankful for Tico Productions. They're going to take everything that we've done, and by the end of July, we'll be able to have a beautiful production that will be aired on KCPS-TV. It will go out to each of our families via email, and it will be available on our website for anybody to view. But I think the big thing is just how thankful parents have been. And I will say my wife is probably listening tonight. She put a tweet out that she was very skeptical at first and wasn't happy when she heard the news of how we were going to do it. But after being there and watching her daughter walk across the stage, it was all worth it. And so for me, I want to share this with you before I read my statement. This happened today, and I don't know how well you can see this. This is an East High School student, and what she had on here is that she said, "My dreams," and I'm a class of 2020, "don't have borders." And I thought that was just powerful, given everything that's going on right now. And I'm hoping that as a school district that we've done our part to make sure that we have expressed to our kids or taught them how to express themselves. And that's where, at this point, we want to make sure that we're developing youngsters that are going to get out here and fight for their community, fight for their city, and become advocates and to be a positive force within our communities. And I think what I'm going to read to you right now will encompass why I think it's important that we get on board with doing everything that we can to give every single one of these students a fair and equitable opportunity at a great education. So this first statement, and I believe all of this is posted to our website, and if it isn't, it will be. But this is support for our dreamers in DACA. And this was utilized last night in a community town hall. What was it, Manny? I'm sorry, a community forum or protest that we had.
It was a rally to celebrate the DACA decision that had Congressman Cleaver, 2 state reps, Dr. Bedell's statement, and several others.
All right, so I want to make sure that everybody hear it. So this is how it reads. We have a mission in Kansas City Public Schools to simply provide every child with a high quality education that equips them to be productive adults who can achieve their dreams and help improve their community. That's our job in KCPS, and we will continue to defend the right of every single child to receive that kind of education in our schools, regardless of their status. That is why we celebrate the Supreme Court's decision to keep DACA from being dismantled. We will not let the dreams of our undocumented children be destroyed by political expediency. Diversity is a strength in KCPS. We consider it a point of pride that KCPS is the most diverse public school in Missouri. Our families speak more than 60 different languages. More than 25% of our families have their roots in Latin America. In many cases, they overcame enormous obstacles to come here. In every case, they have chosen Kansas City as their home, and they have worked incredibly hard to build lives, plant churches, and grow businesses here. They choose to send their kids to our schools. And their kids, they work hard and they produce value. They are second to none. And as public educators, we are privileged to have these families in our schools. They are strong and they are smart and they simply care. They are committed to their families and communities. And we saw that at these commencements over the last 3 weeks. Whether documented or undocumented, they are fully invested members of our community and deserve to be given respect, love, and support. This wonderful array of lives and stories comprise the pieces that make up the quilt of our community. It is essential that we wrap our children in a safe, nurturing, and supportive environment. So I want to be very clear with everybody. No matter their legal status, we will welcome and nurture these new Americans in our schools and in our communities every single day. Children cannot learn if they are afraid that armed authorities may show up and carry them and their loved ones to other places. Think about that. It's a dark age nightmare, but it's a nightmare that's all too real for many of our families. And we saw that with the Faxon 4th grader or 3rd grader, where they punched through the window and deported that father. And he was the primary caretaker for that student. Children, mothers, fathers, sisters, and brothers, please know that you will always be safe within KCPS. We will not tolerate, facilitate, or endorse any attempt to take children or their family members into custody and disturb the teaching and learning happening in our schools. We simply won't stand for it. We've said this 2 years ago. We stand by those statements. We will do everything within our control to make sure our schools are safe havens for every student and their family members. That is where we stand, and that remains our pledge to our community. So I wanted to make sure that everybody heard that and give Ms. Manson, you and the board, any opportunities to make comments before I read this statement that went out today.
I'd like to offer my board members, anyone who would like to make a comment. Mr. Abarca.
Yeah, Dr. Bedell, team, I think this statement is so incredibly important for all of our DACA students. It's not just a Latinx issue. We have students who basically are being stifled by a terrible policy or terrible focus on restrictive immigration policy. And the Supreme Court win is only a small win for the longer path of what should be permanent solution pathway to citizenship. And so thank you, Dr. Bedell, and everyone else for embracing this issue and sharing this, because I know that this gives a little bit boost of hope to a lot of our students who probably just graduated and don't know where they're going next.
Thank you. Are there any other board members who want to comment on this? It really is, it was an important victory, but I I hear you, Mr. Barca. It's one step, but I think one of the things that we all take pride in is that when there's a lot of fear and anxiety in our community, that when children come to our schools, they can feel free to be themselves and to engage with others, and they hopefully can let go of some of that fear because we create a nurturing environment. So thank you, Dr. Bedell, for sharing that message.
Thank you. And before I read this next statement, I do want to say this publicly. There are several superintendents that have sent text messages to me regarding this economic development project. Our superintendents, and I'm trying to think of the name, Mike Wright, I believe is his name. I want to thank you for sending out just some well wishes regarding everything that we're going through, and I appreciate it. But then there are a couple of other superintendents that have weighed in. Kenny Southwick, who's the leader of the cooperating school districts. I want to thank you for calling me today and checking on us. I want to thank Alan Markley, who talked about understanding all of what we're dealing with and will continue to be in that fight with us. Kenny Rodriguez, another superintendent that reached out today. Paul Kinder over in Blue Springs reached out today. And Danny Clemens, another one that reached out today. So I really want to thank, these were just a few. I mean, there's many people that have reached out, but to know that we do have support in some of these other school districts around some of these issues we're dealing with, I had to publicly make mention of some of those superintendents and just say, thank you all for your continuous support in this fight as we try to make sure that we provide equitable services to our kids. This statement went out today, and this was in regard to the Blue Scope project. And I'm just going to read this, and there's a lot of people who may be offended by it, but I think as a superintendent, I'm at a point where I can't worry about, worrying about who I'm offending by speaking where my heart is and speaking based on facts. And it's not to tick off people, but to raise an issue around how race plays out in this city. I've seen it since I've come here in 2016. It continues to plague us in a very disproportionate manner. And at some point, we have to say enough is enough. And that's where we are. 13 years spans a child's first day of kindergarten to their last day of high school. In Kansas City public schools, the majority of students experiencing these milestones are children of color. More than half of the students in our classrooms are Black, 56%. On Thursday, the City Council is scheduled to vote on an incentive package for Blue Scope, a $1 billion multinational corporation. After a 100% property tax abatement for 20 years, they are now asking for 13 more, holding the City Council hostage by saying they might move to Kansas if they don't get these incentives. And what they want is a continuation of a deal that has already disproportionately impacted the funding of Kansas City schools, libraries, and mental health resources. So that also includes a number of school districts that touch our boundaries and all of the charter schools that reside within our boundaries. Last week, Mayor Lucas introduced a resolution focused on implementing more equitable practices and policies at City Hall. I'm asking for the City Council to give meaning to their votes of support. Financial decisions can be moral ones, and this request, in my opinion, is a violent economic practice that would never be inflicted on the majority of white school districts in the Northland. I'm confident my superintendent colleagues in those districts would agree. Although they have also faced some of these issues, the extent that we face them here in Kansas City puts us at number 17 in the United States out of over nearly 5,600 school districts that's a part of that calculation. And we are a small school system. Members of the City Council, as well as business leaders, have stood up in recent weeks to say Black Lives Matter. I commend them for doing so. But as the adage goes, actions speak louder than words. If Black Lives Matter to you, then so should the schools south of the river. In the wake of the last month, I am sitting with how racism continues to fester in the culture, conversations, and policies relating to business and economic development practices in our city. Frankly, I'm exhausted with the economic development community pitting the city against the public entities that are doing the work of trying to give our students and their families access to the world they deserve. This is systemic racism. In response to the Blue Scope project, a Northland council member said the council had to think of the city first, not the schools. And when I say a Northland council member, I'm not referring to every single Northland council member. Libraries and mental health services also included in that. Are our families not Kansas City constituents? The funding for public schools is constantly under attack. As we work to budget in these trying and certain times, we continue to fill in the gaps created by the racial and economic inequities our society allows. Even throughout a pandemic, we have supplied multiple meals a day for all Kansas City kids who need them, regardless of whether they attend our school system or not. These are students who don't always have access to food because this city is rife with food deserts. We have sourced technology equipment for our children. We do this because there is a vast digital divide that impacts our families at a higher rate than ones living in other areas of our city. We call those Wi-Fi deserts. We have offered trauma-informed supports as our children continue to have to walk through neighborhoods with increasing gun violence. We have secured resources for families who are dealing with evictions and experiencing homelessness because there is a lack of safe, affordable housing in this city. I understand why the council would want to retain Blue Scope and the earning tax it generates. KCPS supports growth and business retention, and we know a thriving city should benefit all of us. But a Kansas City company believing they can bring forward any additional requests that diverts resources away from our students speaks loudly to the systemic racist real estate practices we have allowed to exist here. Approval by the City Council would speak even louder. This is a call to action to everybody listening, for our elected officials, for our business leaders, for our community stakeholders, to not only stand with me, my board, and KCPS families in our demands for a more equitable city, but to fight for one as well. And as I've stated earlier, enough is enough. That's just where we are right now as a system.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bedell. Very powerful statement. You certainly know, but the community needs to know too that this board of directors stands firmly beside you on these remarks. We encourage this statement. We wanted to see this said. We share in these sentiments. I'll just say that I am optimistic that community and business leaders who are eager to step out and call for the end of racial injustice will recognize that it is time not to just say those things in public and behave differently behind closed doors, to match their actions with their words. And I really appreciate you stepping out and being clear and bold and a champion for children. I want to open this up for any of my colleagues who would like to make a comment.
Madam Chair, I just want to reiterate the importance for the public to understand the financial impact for our students here. And as we face a budget deficit due to some of the COVID realities, now more than ever is it important to make sure that we're maximizing revenues not only to the school district, but to the city as well. And to consider a tax incentive of any project like this is just incongruent with the thoughts and beliefs I think that we all had, and most of us sent new council members to City Hall believing in. So I encourage the public to take this as an opportunity to remind the council members and the mayor of these things, and to stand up and support KCPS and our children, because ultimately, we're training the future here, and if we don't have the resources to properly do that, we're shortchanging ourselves long term. So thank you so much, Dr. Bedell, for being bold, for my colleagues for also supporting this effort, because this is necessary.
Are there any other individuals who'd like to make a comment? Ms. Wolfsey, go ahead.
Dr. Bedell, thank you for your leadership. You know this has been an issue for me since apparently I looked at my emails August of 2014 when I and Jamaica Kendrick sat on a task force about incentive reform when Mayor James promoted his 50% cap ordinance. So it is nearly 6 years later and I won't say nothing has changed because we do actually have an ordinance now, but many of the things that allow this to continue systemically are not changing. And a lot of that is process related. And I just applaud you and the folks, Ms. Jacks and Ms. Pointer, that have been working very diligently to try to affect change in this area because it is a hard slog. And I am going to think aspirationally about our city council that this is a moment for them to rise to the occasion for this city. And I know they can do it. It's going to be a hard decision, a hard vote, but I know they can do it. So I am looking forward to tomorrow at 3 o'clock. And I hope many people will tune in to watch the dialogue that will happen on the dais amongst the people that represent you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Yes, Ms. Cortez.
Thank you, Ms. Manser. Dr. Bedell, I want to thank you for your boldness and your speaking the truth in a way that allows each of us to stand with you. I think it's very important to emphasize that our critics who point the finger and say all you're about is no need to look at the process they've created. Ms. Wolfsey touched on it, but the process sets this up to be a lose-lose conversation for Kansas City Public Schools. If our council members who want to see growth and a healthy city want this to be a process that's really about the city growing and not businesses growing, then this needs to be re-examined by the council and demanded by the council that the process be inclusive. We talk about equality of opportunity and equality of outcome. This is all about equality of opportunity. It's not just so that we can complain at the end. And we really need to make sure that those who point the finger and say, you're just about no, look at themselves about how they can change the process to make us a partner as opposed to a critic.
Thank you so much for those comments. Really appreciate that. Dr. Bedell, thank you. Is any final word on that?
Yeah, I do. I know when you do this kind of, when you voice yourself in this manner, or you voice your issues in writing, it's always left for interpretation. And I try my best not to look at a lot of social media. That's why you all don't see me generally retweeting or liking a lot of things, because I try to stay off of it and just focus on the work. But I do look at my emails, and I get, I received an email here where I don't know how people interpret things, but I will say this: there was no intention in there whatsoever to refer to council members in the Northland as being racist. So I don't know how that interpretation could even come out. The fact of the matter is, when we look at the demographics of school systems and we look at where KCPS is ranked in comparison to other school systems that may have a predominant white student population, things that tend to happen to us don't happen in these other systems, and people will readily admit that. And so people are going to get in their feelings and they're going to take things the way they need to take it. I'm not backing off of my position. I'm not backing off of that statement. We've been talking about this since I've arrived in 2004, and we do support economic development. But the piece is, we want to make sure that when we look at economic development, that it is applied in a very fair way across this city, not just in certain areas where it's convenient for people but we want to have enhancement in our communities so that we can have a revitalization. So I will not back off of this statement, and I'm certain there will be more that will come in, but we will continue to move on. And I look forward to working with everybody, those who are in support and those who have some type of problem with the statement. Let's get together and talk about it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I saw my colleague, Mr. Hogan, clapping, I think, and I want to add my applause to that. The next item of business are regular business items, and we have a full agenda here. So Dr. Bedell, I'm going to turn it over to you for the first item.
All right, so we will get started. Linda Quinley, approval of the FY20 Comprehensive Budget Amendment 2. We are ready for you to put the slide deck up and take us through this.
Actually, Ms. Thompson's going to do this one for us.
Okay, great.
Good evening, everyone. We're closing out FY20, and this is our Budget Amendment 2. We're asking for a total, the budget ends up being $277,428,704. As you see, our revenue variance, we have an increase of $19,182,683, which the protested taxes are in that because they arrived in June to our office. The most of the $19 million, though, is grants. We got additional grants that we accepted in the last quarter after December of $12,102,857, and that's detailed on page 24 and 25 of your book, your budget book. But the majority of it, $10 million, was Head Start was 4.2, and then we also added the CARES Act of 5.9 million. So the revenue over expenditures is $7,079,826. We shored up our reserves, so our reserve balance is $53,758,418, and we're asking for your approval tonight.
Thank you. I want to open this up for any questions from my colleagues on this. Have any questions?
Actually, Ms. Manser.
Yes.
I actually just want to thank Ms. Quinley and her team. A number of us, had posed questions about both the amendment and the budget, and the team was very responsive in giving us additional depth and understanding of the documents that are being presented this evening. So thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Thank you. I think what the community may not recognize is that this is a quite a back and forth process, and we have been receiving material and have the opportunity to ask questions of the administration and receive information back to help us with our understanding. And so I appreciate Ms. Cortez's comments in that regard. So thank you again, Ms. Thompson. If there are no other questions, it would be in order to receive a motion to approve the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve budget amendment number 2 to the FY 2020 comprehensive budget.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded. Is there any debate on that motion? Hearing none, this will be a roll call vote to approve the FY20 Comprehensive Budget Amendment 2.
Ms. Manser?
Yes.
Mr. Abarca?
Yes.
Ms. Cortez?
Yes.
Mr. Hogan?
Yes.
Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom?
Yes.
Ms. Wolfsey?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes, and we come back to Dr. Bedell for discussion of the FY21 comprehensive budget.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We are asking the board to take action on approving the FY21 comprehensive budget. For this presentation, I will ask Linda Quinley to put the slide deck up and go through the presentation.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity, Board of Directors. We want to start by really appreciation. This is a journey, and it's a journey that, as we look at our timeline, we began internally in January and February, and this board, which means then our public, has had the opportunity. You see lists down here of 1, 2, 3, 4 opportunities to engage in and provide feedback and comment and questions around the budget for next year. This does not list a special meeting the board asked to have on June 17th, just to make sure that they had deeper understanding of how to read the document and use the document. So we appreciate that time and effort. But here we are down here on the green, or on this blue line tonight, asking for final approval of the budget that we've been working on collectively over these last several months. The statutory deadline is June 30th because our new fiscal year begins July 1st. One of the most important things around a budget is local property taxes. We'll look at that a little bit. This is an important date for us to know because we set our budget for next year using assumptions around assessed valuation and tax levies, although we don't have that information until next fall. But a key component. A reminder, we've seen this slide several times over the last several months. What we used internally as our guidelines from an administrative standpoint under Dr. Bedell's leadership, we accepted budget requests from buildings and from departments, and those include staff to meet needs of students and families, capital projects to meet needs of a building, additional supports. We are in year 3 now of a zero-based budgeting process where we ask every budget collector to go through line by line and start at 0 and build their budget need. That's done intentionally to make sure that we aren't just rolling over budgets that aren't necessarily needed and that we aren't shortchanging someone who has great needs. This is also our 3rd year to use the tiered system of support, and you've seen that in your binders for the budget document. That is an instructional tiering system created by Dr. Shepard and the school leadership team to provide enhanced supports above the DESE standards where most needed in our system. We focus on improvement of salaries and continued employee benefits because the majority of our work is people providing service, and this is an important component as we work to remain to be competitive or more competitive in the market for those staffs. And of course, the end game is to make sure we're bringing you a budget with an appropriate fund balance. I won't read all of these numbers, but this is one of my favorite slides that our budget team puts together. Numbers of who you support, where you support them really make a difference and are what drive a budget. So we'll just point out a couple of important components of information here. Our September and January membership and then our average membership for this year, these are the counts upon which our revenue is received by the state. You can see the ethnicity of our student base and how diverse it is, which of course dictates needs in a considerable amount of categories. Student enrollment is the largest driver of funding in a public school system. We keep a history here to give you that story. You will note that we are assuming in this budget about an 87 student decrease for our K-12 numbers next year. That's based on trend study that we get from the planning department, as well as some awarenesses of things like expansions of grades and additional opportunities in the charter sector. Important to note that depending upon where these 87 children that we have this year go next year, that does drive down our revenues by anywhere from $400,000 to $900,000. So this is an important component of our budget planning. Again, we're sharing with you some slides we've shared previously, but so very important. Since 82% of our total budget comes from our local tax revenues, the conversation you just had is so spot on and so incredibly important. Of that 82%, 85% of it comes from local property tax. When you add in almost 3% from delinquent, that means 88% of our budget relies on those local tax dollars. So what's on the tax rolls matter. Our second largest line of local revenue is Proposition C sales tax, which is a Missouri sales tax for educational. We'll look at that a little bit in a moment. Property tax levy comparisons over the years. This is, again, with assessed valuation, one of the major components of calculating our revenues. Kansas City's listed at the top here. You will notice when you come to this side, and you compare our levy to the others, we are the lowest total tax levy in this surrounding area, and then among some comparison districts of like status and size as ours. We are the only one of these that does not have a debt service levy. That's a very important component because that's what drives the ability to do major projects inside a school system. So you can see Grandview has $1.05, North Kansas City $1.30, and they just voted for an increase for next year, as did Lee Summit, who's at $1.07 and just passed an increase. These budgets are going to include much larger capital project funding because they have this specific and separate funding source for those. You'll also see that there are only 5 districts who put some additional money into capital projects from their operating levy. Kansas City Public Schools has none in either. This one is because we don't have a voter authorized levy for debt service. And this one is because if we moved some of our $4.95, 96 cents into capital, it reduces revenue opportunities for charter schools. One of the largest components of looking at the budget is, as we've mentioned over and over again, assessed valuation. You will see right here in the middle of the screen, we are planning for no increase in assessed valuation, which actually means a decrease because every year you should receive growth from the new construction that comes on the books. We are projecting, when we compare to our second budget amendment, not the one you just approved, but the one from January, we are considering an increase to the budget from next year. However, this is flat to the budget amendment you just passed because it picks up those revenues that have been received to date for the most part, all but about $1 million. Here's that Proposition C look that I talked about. You can see this, since this is a sales tax, and while we're seeing some really good signs and information from Jefferson City about June sales tax and May sales tax revenues, we are still projecting to have less sales tax per pupil next year by about $36. So almost a little over $900,000 decrease in this revenue line is included in this budget. Here we are with the state revenue picture. State Foundation Formula and Classroom Trust Fund collectively make up what is the traditional funding for schools from the state. Because Kansas City Public Schools and charter schools in Kansas City are closer and closer in total student populations, and local revenues that are due to charters are higher per pupil than state revenue is, we end up receiving $0 from the state on either of these lines in order for the state to pass through that local share to charter schools. This is the regular steady flow of revenue, as we all know. This is the payment that comes once a month, whereas that property tax revenue starts coming in January and kind of dwaddles down to the end of the year. Very small portion of our budget from transportation revenue, because while transportation costs are considerably higher, the state only reimburses at about 17%. A reminder of some of the key things that were added to the budget this year during the conversations and work that we had. We value experience, we value our staff, and so we have left adequate funds inside this budget to address assuring that we give experience credit to staff who remain, and also that we address continuing expected increases in medical, dental, life insurance, and the retirement costs that go along with that $2.7 million in increases. These numbers in red that you see reference our strategic plan. That's one of the requirements when any budget leader in the district asks for a request, that they tell us how this aligns to the plan. And if they can't come up with that, then that's probably not something that's going to move forward. But as you look at your document, I want to give you a little hint here, and I was going to try to do some snippets in, but the document is a lot of numbers and it becomes really hard to do. But I would direct you, when you're trying to find, for example, where the additional resources are for these top two lines, if you look on page 23, you'll find that salary section at the top, and you'll find a benefits section right below it. And that's where you're going to be able to find these in there. All of these numbers are nets of ups and downs, so you won't actually tag any of them directly, but I'm going to give you a few hints along the way about where you can find some of these things, because we do want this evolving budget document to be very useful to the reader. The second section here, fixed costs, which is really about stability and making sure we honor agreements and we're able to continue just running largely the day-to-day operation. These are the kinds of resources that have been put into those. Over $300,000 for student transportation. We are expecting a net decrease in utilities based on the fact that we've sold off some vacant buildings that had fairly high utility rates. Our property and liability insurance, which we're going to talk about later in this board meeting, we've anticipated an increase there. And in this coming year, the board of directors will have elections. So every other year we increase this line because the Board of Education does actually have to pay their portion of the cost of an election. Also in this operating budget, you will find increase in digital learning tools for reading, math. There are a small little line added for some digital music because our learning leaders are transitioning toward being able to teach in different ways. That is about a $300,000 net increase because they did make some reductions in their line, in addition to $1.2 million that is coming from the CARES Act. And Dr. Shepard will be talking with you in the next week or so about some of that major spending there. We're just hitting some of the highlights. These are certainly not everything, but some of the big things that we want to share with you. You can see continued investment in equity inclusion, specifically making sure that more children have access to dual credit and AP coursework. We're really excited about this third bullet where we're investing nearly $350,000 in an early childhood cooperative agreement with Operation Breakthrough and Emmanuel Family and Child Development Center, where they will have classrooms in their neighborhood facilities that fall under us. And so we will claim those ADA and we will work with them day to day on providing services. And you can see again where this ties into the strategic plan. And a continued effort of the superintendent and this board and our school leadership folks have been to really focus on CTE. We had a grant that was funding a staff position that has rolled off, and then we're continuing to expand Project Lead the Way materials for students. I think this is we have one more page after this. We are adding student devices. In addition, we have some other lines that we're adding based on the CARES Act. Then a specific effort both at the intention and will of the superintendent and our new chief of marketing and communications, but our board as well, to make sure that we are active in our community with communications and marketing and sharing the story of KCPS, letting families know what's available. Legal services, we have an increase there just to make sure that we are adequately funded to meet those needs. And then let me go back to this page. Oh. I always do that wrong. Here we go. I wanted to give you a clue on this one. On page 24 of your budget document, when you look at that, you're going to find where this increase happens on line function code 6361. So if you've got it out and you're trying to follow some of these, that's another hint of where to find one of them. The final set of increases and changes in this budget on the expenditure side relate to continuing to work to encourage students to understand how important their attendance is. So we've increased that line for some student incentive program expansion. Making some additions in HR for Teach for America fees. That's a great resource. Human resources are always very excited to get access to these young teachers. They've raised their fees. And additionally, we're adding a diversity recruiter in that department. In our English language learners area, we are keeping some staff that were falling off of some grants because they were shrinking and going away, and beginning phases of opening a newcomer center. And then finally, collectively, in order to manage the budget as a whole, we did ask all of our leaders to look deep into their budgets and make reductions that they could that did not immediately impact the classroom. And so this budget includes $2.1 million of reductions and just over 24 FTE. In an entirely separate category than those operating budget lines that we were just looking at, I'm going to very quickly walk through the capital fund planning, and this is a page straight out of the budget document, so you can find it there again later. We are anticipating we're going to start at just about $22 million in capital projects fund. As a reminder, once revenues are placed into this fund, they cannot be pulled out and put into any other fund. So we cannot use those for operating purpose of any kind. They can only be used for the purpose of capital projects. We're adding about $4.5 million of revenue to that to make $26 million available for projects. After a conversation with our board and making sure that we're keeping our operating reserves as secure as we can and to allow ourselves flexibility as we see this year change, we did move about $5 million of planned revenues from merchants and manufacturers from capital projects over to the operating budget, just in order to make sure that the end ask in operating is one that is as safe and comfortable as possible. I'm not going to redo all of these, but this is a list of the projects that we are planning in this budget. Most important, the very first thing we must pay, we are obligated to pay out of this fund, is the principal and interest on the outstanding debt that the district has of just over $8 million. You'll see as you look down this list and this page, we have 25 different school buildings getting some type of improvement or renovation, in addition to almost everyone being impacted in some way through our summer project work, the contracts for which you've already authorized for this summer. So we appreciate that board letting us get started on that early. This does bring right at a $9.8 million projected expenditures over revenue. But remember, that's okay because we started with a large fund balance. So we end this with still roughly $12 million going into the next year with these projects as part of our budget. But this is the major, as you read the executive summary and look at the document, this is the major reduction in fund balance in our total budget. This page is a great summary that Veronica and Aaron put together. One of the best summary pages you're going to find, kind of easy to read. I'm going to just run you through it very quickly because this is the summary budget. So as obligated by state statute, we're reporting by fund. So you see the general fund, this is really what we live on day to day for operating. Capital projects, collectively those together make the Missouri definition of total operating. Our grants and donations, and then child nutrition services, which sits alone because they live off of their own revenues and they self-sustain. When you look at this collectively, we're at $258.5 million of revenue in the budget for 2021. And then the way this next section works is a really great way to see how we're asking to spend that money. So it's broken out by function code over here to the left. These are all by DESE definition, and you see the first and most important category, instruction and building administration. So collectively, $125 million of this 258 or 47% first goes into instruction. That supports 1,371 FTE. Then as we look at the next page, support services, this is sort of everything else that it takes to support that instructional component. When we come down through here and you get really familiar with DESE function coding, 2100 through 2200, if we drew a line right across here under educational media services, these really, everything above this, which totals about $25 million, is also direct impact on schools because these are services for children that we provide. And coming from the outside world many, many years ago to public education, having an understanding of these levels and types of service that are in instruction was something new for me. So I like this page so much because it gives our public a great idea. So this is another 5% of the budget that goes directly straight into our students. And then collectively in all of these counts, it's $122 million to provide the various kinds of supports it takes to run a school district. Everything from custodial and insurance and maintenance and utilities to student transportation, human resources, and the business function of the district. This last summary page One of the smallest but most important components of the operating budget is community services. You can see we have just over $8 million in community services, $5.6 million of that being early childhood instruction. This is an important and growing line, and you can see right here the increase in FTE from or the total FTE of 130 in this category. And we mentioned earlier the increase in this line. In addition, here again is our $8.3 million in debt, making a total expenditure of $264 million. We are asking the board to allow us to budget to spend $1.6 million roughly out of the general fund's operating reserve, and then $4 million out of capital, plus an additional 5.9 down here, and that's how we get to that $9 million we were looking at earlier. We end this budget with unrestricted fund balance of $52.5 million in operating and a total of 57.9. This 52.5 million is just under 25%, very much within the comfort zone of a nice fund balance. This does not include, what is not included in this budget are release the protest taxes. We talked about, Mr. Barker talked about it during his treasurer's report. While we've received roughly $9 million this year, we know that there's in the range of $4.5 to $5 million still sitting at the state or county under appeals. Those revenues are not considered in this budget because while we expect we will receive the bulk of those in this fall, we'd like to wait and consider and plan on those when they arrive. It also does not address additional needs around reopening because the team is working hard right now to bring you a really solid plan for that. And when we bring the actual final plan, we'll also bring really solid estimates on that. You saw a slide earlier where we have some of those things charted out at this point, but it's not completely there. So all in all, we are asking for approval of this budget, and we want to thank everyone who's been in this process along the way. And that does include our community and our board, because we've been walking hand in hand on this for many months.
Thank you, Ms. Quinley. I want to open this up for questions that the board has on this budget that's been presented. It looks like I've got Ms. Cortez and Ms. Wolfsey. So go ahead, Rita.
I'd really just wanted to thank Ms. Quinley and her team, really the whole KCPS team for the process and the thoroughness in approaching the budget. I also, Ms. Quinley, might encourage you just to share with us what you anticipate going forward, meaning this is the budget as usual, but we know that this isn't usual.
Right.
So what we can anticipate beyond this, so that people kind of understand that this is step one, this is not final step.
Right, and that's the art and science, if there actually is one, to budgeting, which I believe it is. There are at least 3 people sitting on this call right now who really love this kind of work, and we're the ones that have been doing the bulk of it. But as we continue year after year to, one of the things that Dr. Bedell really encourages is tremendous transparency and inclusion in our processes. And we've worked really hard to try to do that. So I'm going to answer your question, but I'm also going to take this opportunity to encourage the reader to review the executive summary section, which is new for our budget this year. It really helps you understand and go along through this. And we want to tell the story of why this budget is important and why we've made those decisions. And Ms. Cortez, to your question, absolutely. The first budget is done with the best information you have at the time you have it. And when we look back at our timeline, we started the bulk of this work in February and March, and we really need to kind of know where we're settling by April. This year it was late May because we were trying to adapt to lost revenues that were happening this year. We've been able to look at those, and we addressed those in the executive summary, where in May, sales tax revenues slowed down. In June, withholdings happened from the state of Missouri for all schools, and that's going to decrease our revenues this year by well over $2.5 million. We are watching with anticipation what that means rolling into next year. And then additionally, as I mentioned, we'll be bringing back the plan of what it takes to open school differently next year and be prepared to pivot when we need to pivot, because we expect that will happen. So you're absolutely right. This is sort of a normal year budget, and then we'll be coming to you very quickly with an unusually early request to amend and change so that we can adapt and do things differently. That is the beauty of your wise counsel to move us to $1.6 million of deficit spend versus an earlier number that was a little larger than that, because it leaves us some flexibility to come to you with great comfort in that.
Right. Thank you so much. Ms. Wolfsey?
Again, I'll just say it. Thank you so much for all the time. I know how much you've been spending and your group. Hopefully next year will be a lot easier, Linda. So I'm going to start with this comment that I think you said at the beginning: student enrollment is the largest driver of revenue. And it was not lost on me in the narratives, which I loved, the mention of the decline in elementary. I thought it was, maybe I'm getting mine mixed up. There's some increases, but mostly some declines there in enrollment, which kind of, is always a concern of mine. But what I liked was I am starting, and I'm flipping back and forth in my book, but I did immediately, when I was looking through, look to see, are we budgeting to be able to focus on dealing with and trying to address enrollment and retention within our student base. So I'm pleased to see the dollars there. I'm a marketer, so I'd love to see more, but I'm not going to be greedy because it's a very unusual time. So, but we have got to get our enrollment moving in another direction. And so I think this is my last point, and they're all tied together. I really liked this budget, Ms. Quinley. It felt more like a book that I could read and I could understand. And I give you major kudos. And I think not that you would get 1,000 people to come to this sort of PTA or SAC meeting or DAC meeting, but I think this is the beginning of where people start to understand what it is we do, how we use public taxpayer dollars, how do they show up in my school, and how can I have voice. It's kind of, I guess, Manny, to your point of the kind of the PIAC concept. If I would love to see each school grab their tiered page, understand that, and then maybe even understand some of these program pages and tie together the fact that, hey, you know what, I've always wanted or thought about, we need this in our school, and start dialogues using this as a tool. And to do that, you almost have to start with that in mind at the beginning of the school year, because you can't do it later when you're trying to get everybody's input. It's too much for them to digest at that time. So I guess it's all to say, I hope that we use this wonderful tool you've created and start to use it in a digestible way so that our community and our parents can become more involved in their public schools. I mean, it's a really simple concept, but thank you again for all your hard work.
Thank you. Mr. Abarca, were you raising your hand?
Yeah. Again, just mucho kudos to Linda, team, Dr. Vidal, everyone who's been involved in this process. It has been a long road coming. And between COVID, property taxes, and all the other fluctuations, it is impressive that we have a document that is still somewhat living, but a finalized document for us to approve. So kudos to you all for that. I just want to reiterate, I think, what my colleague, Ms. Wolfsey, has said. I think had proposed some early ideas about somewhat of mimicking what Kansas City, Missouri, the city of Kansas City, Missouri does, where we kind of deploy this effort of education on the budgeting process so folks can understand how challenging it is for us to make these important decisions that otherwise they're only seeing a finite component of. And so I just want to reiterate, I hope that we can take this, and as things kind of settle a little bit with hopefully COVID and the county property taxes, that we get into that relatively early this next year, because I don't want to find us in a place where we have to educate and then also budget at the same time and then prepare for our approval of the budget. So I would like to and happy to work on this with everyone, but very excited to see where we can take that and how we can engage our community there, because that seems like a great learning opportunity.
Thank you. Mr. Hogan?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks. I feel like I haven't met my minimum words for the night, so thank you, everyone.
It's okay.
We like that, Nate.
So I just have to, and I know we're sort of piling on with the thanks, but I think what the community might not see and recognize, that there are a lot of questions and a lot of debate and a lot of examination that goes on behind the scenes, a lot of reading and a lot of redoing. And Ms. Quinley and her team have been incredibly responsive. They made adjustments in the capital budgets line, capital projects budget line, in response to board's request. They have wholly reflected strategic priorities that this board has affirmed are important, which is increasing the capability of keeping our teachers and staff. We are in the people business. The majority of our budget is reflective of salaries and benefits. This is absolutely a people business first and foremost. And there was a lot of work that went behind the scenes to address the salary schedules and steps for experience, things that are designed to keep our teachers. We value them. We work hard to recruit them. It costs us time and effort to get them here, and we want to keep them and have them be successful. We've talked a lot about technology tools this year. COVID taught us that we had to be ready. It ratcheted up our timeline for getting ready, but a lot of investment has been made, and we've used CARES Act funding, I believe, very smartly to prepare ourselves for the unknown of a new school year. In recent weeks, we board members have received a lot of communication from community members who want to know what we're doing around equity and what we're doing around social emotional well-being of our students. So I'm particularly pleased that Ms. Quinley was able to point to the significant investment in this budget that she pointed out to us, that's around counseling and school counselors, social workers, and other social and behavioral support services for our children. We recognize that it's as important as anything we do in terms of academic intervention. So I feel very personally confident that this budget is a reflection of the priorities and goals of this district and of this administration. The narrative component is really important. It's a great learning tool. And folks who maybe were looking, wondering, well, does this board really take this work seriously? We do. I've got my budget book right here, and I brought it in because it is written up. It's got flags all over it, and we have read it. It is bedtime reading for sure. So anyway, I think that I appreciate that, everything that's been developed so far. As we go forward, just from my perspective, and I'll stop with my comments, I think we've got some work to do as a board and as an administration to educate families within each of their schools and make sure that they understand the equity focus on the budgeting that happens within their school As Ms. Wolfsey pointed out, they can find that detail if they go into this budget, but it's really important that families maybe, and this is something maybe the DAC can take on as well and help facilitate this, because this is really an equity-based budgeting focus, and it tells you a lot about how decisions are made. So I just want to point that out. So thank you, everyone. I feel very good about where we've come in a really unusual time. Are there other comments, Mr. Barca?
Yeah, sorry to tail on to the back of your comments, Board Chair, but I think you brought up something that I think we need to make sure and say publicly, so that the public understands that this budgeting process also very much depends on them and their engagement here. One of the early things that Ms. Quinley had said that I just want to reiterate, because it is not a component of this budget, but could be, and it could be a dramatic component. And that's the voter authorized debt service levy that we've not seen in nearly 60 years, which nearly every other regional school district has. And that is a major component that our city and the public can invest in us as a community. And I think that's something that I would like to very much see in future budgets.
Amen, brother.
Hear, hear. All right. Are there any additional questions and comments before we go forward with our motion? Okay, I'm getting a little feedback there. All right, well then it would now be in order to have a motion to approve the FY 21 comprehensive budget.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded. Is there any debate on this motion? Hearing none, this will be a roll call vote. The secretary will call the roll.
Ms. Manser?
Yes.
Mr. Abarca?
Yes.
Ms. Cortez?
Yes.
Mr. Hogan?
Yes.
Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom?
No.
Ms. Wolfsey?
Yes.
Thank you. There is a majority in favor, and the budget is approved. Dr. Dell, we go on to the next items.
All right, Madam Chair, before we move on to the next item, I really want to thank Linda Quinley and her team, Aaron Thompson, all of those wonderful employees in her department that, had to do a lot of responding to a number of questions that came from this board. So anybody who sits out here and says that this is a rubber stamp board, I kind of get offended by that, because I think there were a lot of things that we had to do, and we were even at the point where if we felt that we could not come to a decision tonight, that we would have moved this and had a special board meeting. And so we definitely appreciate our board doing their part. The budget is one of 4 major functions of responsibility for a board, and it is something that should be taken very seriously. And so we thank you all for your engagement throughout this process. I also want to say to Linda, when we hired you a couple of years ago, we said that we wanted to really build this budget in a way where ultimately it would turn into almost a narrative type document that could tell a story around how our board policies, along with the strategic plan, along with our equity funding model, could easily be articulated. And we have just now gotten to this point this year where now we have the narrative information in there that I think will make it crystal clear for people to understand the direction our school district is heading in. So I want to thank you, because you're here at about 6 in the morning. I think I beat you one time this whole year getting to work early, but you're here and you're putting in the work along with your team. And so thank you for that. And I'm very proud and I'm very pleased that where we are. And the most important thing I can say to you all, board, I shared this on PBS NewsHour last night. If you haven't seen it, watch it. They asked me the question around what is your budgetary situation and how are you going to be prepared to deal with this upcoming school year, given that things may change. And I said, The one thing I can say is we've been excellent stewards of our budget. My board is prepared for us to come to them with an amendment if needed around what it is that it will take for us to make sure that there will not be any significant interruptions or impact to student learning. And I told them that we're gathering all of our data now. Our hopes is that by mid-July, we can come back to the board and say, okay, based on everything that we've gathered, here's what we believe we will need in order for us to be able to move through this school year without having to come back to you and ask to spend further into reserves throughout the year. So I just want you all to know that that was on national news last night, and I appreciate your support in working with us and knowing that you all have our back as we try to navigate these uncharted territory or uncharted waters at this time. All right. So with that being said, now we will move on to get our 12-month employee calendar approved, and I will pass this over to Dr. Collier.
Hello, everyone. We are putting forth our 12-month employee calendar. This calendar mirrors our school year calendar. However, these employees work year-round, 261 days, and this calendar also includes the holidays that our school staff receive. And so there are 19 holiday days that are built into this calendar as well. And so we are submitting this evening for approval.
Thank you. Are there any questions about the calendar? This is, again, as Dr. Collier said, this is for the 12-month employees. We've already done the teacher calendar previously. All right. Hearing no questions, it would be in order to have a motion to approve the 2021 12-month employee calendar.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any debate on the motion? Hearing no debate, the question is on approving the 2021 12-month employee calendar. This will be a roll call vote, and the secretary will call the roll.
Ms. Manser?
Yes.
Mr. Abarca?
Yes.
Ms. Cortez?
Yes.
Mr. Hogan?
Yes.
Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom?
Yes.
Ms. Wolfsey?
Yes.
Thank you. There is a majority in favor, and the 12-month employee calendar is approved. Next item, Dr. Bedell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This next item is the Kansas City Audio and Visual in the amount of $336,340. We're asking the board to take action on that contract. And I want to make sure I think I got a little confused. Ms. Quinley, this is for the thermometers or the temperature readers?
Correct. These are digital temperature scanning devices that will be at all of our entrances and exits as we start school to help us manage safe space.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions on this item? Hearing no questions, this is yet among one of several items we've had to deal with as a pandemic expense that we've never seen probably in our lifetimes before. So thank you for bringing this forward. It would be in order to have a motion to approve the contract with Kansas City Audio Visual.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. It has been moved and seconded to approve the contract with Kansas City Audio Visual. Is there any debate on the motion? Hearing none, this will be a roll call vote. The secretary will call the roll.
Ms. Manser?
Yes.
Mr. Abarca?
Yes.
Ms. Cortez?
Yes.
Mr. Hogan?
Yes.
Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom?
Yes.
Ms. Wolfsey?
Yes.
Thank you. The contract with Kansas City Audio Visual is approved. The next item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next item is we're asking the board to take action on the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Kansas City Summer Partnership MOU in the amount of $250,744.
Thank you, Dr. Bedell. And just for our community, this summer partnership has been a remote.
With Boys and Girls Club, Yeah, and I believe that's the case because I know a lot of it, I think with this one and also Alvin Ailey, they all were done in a remote fashion.
Thank you. Are there any questions about this item? All right. Hearing none, it would be in order to receive a motion to approve the summer partnership MOU with Boys and Girls Club.
So moved.
Is there a second? Great. Thank you. It has been moved and seconded. Is there any debate on the motion? Hearing none, this will be a roll call vote. The secretary will call the roll.
Ms. Manser,
Yes.
Mr. Abarca,
Yes.
Ms. Cortez,
Yes.
Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Wolsey.
Yes.
Thank you. There is a majority in favor, and the MOU is accepted. The next item, Dr. Bedell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next item is the KC Friends of Alvin Ailey Summer Partnership MOU in the amount of $13,940, which was done remotely also.
All right. Thank you. Are there any questions on this motion or on this recommendation? Okay. Hearing none, it would be in order to have a motion to approve the MOU with KC Friends of Alvin Ailey Summer Program.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any debate on the motion? Hearing none, this will be a roll call vote. The secretary will call the roll.
Ms. Manser,
Yes.
Mr. Abarca,
Yes.
Ms. Cortez,
Yes.
Mr. Hogan,
Abstain.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Wolsey.
Yes.
There is a majority in favor, and the MOU is approved. The next item on the agenda.
Yes, the next item on the agenda is the Apple Inc. contract of $440,340,000, and that is for our iPad devices for our K through 2, maybe pre-K through 2 if I'm not mistaken, but you ought to take action on that item.
Are there any questions on this item? Dr. Bedell, I just want to confirm this purchase of the iPads for the pre-K through grades 2, this is part of the plan to further expand our digital capabilities. Is that correct?
Absolutely, so that we will truly be one-to-one across the entire spectrum.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions? All right. It would be in order to have a motion to approve the Apple Inc. purchase of 1,200 iPads.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any debate on the motion? Hearing no debate, this will be a roll call vote. The secretary will call the roll.
Ms. Manser,
Yes.
Mr. Abarca,
Yes.
Ms. Cortez,
Yes.
Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Wolsey.
Yes.
There's a majority in favor, and the purchase with Apple Inc. is approved. The next item of business, Dr. Bedell.
Madam Chair, we're asking the board to take action on the 2021 renewals of district property liability and workers' comp insurance policies in the amount of $2,874.39. I mean, $9.
Are there any questions on this motion? Okay. Hearing no questions, it would be in order to have a motion to approve renewals of district property, liability, and workers' compensation insurance policies.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any debate on the motion? Hearing no debate, this will be a roll call vote. The secretary will call the roll.
Ms. Manser,
Yes.
Mr. Abarca,
Yes.
Ms. Cortez,
Yes.
Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Wolsey.
Yes.
There's a majority in favor, and the item is approved. We now come to are consent items. So it would be in order to receive a motion to approve items 1 through 26 on the consent agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second? All right, thank you. It is moved and seconded to approve the items on the consent agenda. This will be a roll call vote. The secretary will call the roll.
Ms. Manser,
Yes.
Mr. Abarca,
Yes.
Ms. Cortez,
Yes.
Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Wolfsey.
Yes.
There's a majority in favor, and the consent agenda items are approved. This brings us to the conclusion of our agenda for this evening. Dr. Bedell, is there any final words that you want to make before we conclude?
Yeah, we wanted to make sure that the community was aware that we do plan to come back to the board possibly next Wednesday to take action on a couple of important items as it pertains to our curriculum products that we need to get approved so we can start implementation of training. In addition to that, there will be a minor modification to our calendar that was approved by the board. We're going to look at November 3rd as a day that we will allow for no schools to be in operation so that our students, employees, faculty, and staff members will be able to vote. But also, we believe that there will be an increased demand on our sites for polling purposes. And so, given everything that's been going on with the virus and even the potential for the flu, we think it would be best that we just not have school on November 3rd so that we can do our part to help assist the city in those efforts. And we will rearrange and move those days to where we can turn them into professional development that has been agreed upon with our bargaining unit, AFT. So that will happen next week, and just wanted to make sure that I mentioned that to the community and to you all.
Thank you, Dr. Bedell. So the board will have a special meeting on Wednesday, July 1st. There will be one business meeting on July 22nd, and there will be no policy monitoring workshop in the month of July. So thank you, everyone, and to the administration and to all of my colleagues for doing such tremendous work on the budget and understanding and discussion and debate. It's been really robust, and I'm very grateful for all of that. So with this, the meeting is adjourned. Good evening.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.